One of the things we've been doing for several weeks now is we have actually, this earpiece is not fitting right. We have actually been using a service, an order of worship that has a lot of the same pieces to it, but the flow of it is really meant for us to deepen our connection with each other. And so coming together and then doing this thing, learning something of value, really puts the pressure on. And I was very much aware of that when I put it in here. And we'll continue to do that. But we need your feedback for you to be able to say, you know, that was okay, that helped, or that didn't help, or that kind of thing. I will do my best not to take it personally. That's a joke, by the way. Is it? No, I will do my best not to take it personally. And because I think that kind of feedback is important. So the word about life comes from two sources. The first one is Luke. It is a parable that we are familiar with. I ask that you would follow along, and I'm going to do a little bit of extra as we go through this. And Jesus told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Now, let me stop. The reason he told this parable is because somebody came to Jesus and said, I want you to be the judge and make a decision for my family and I, because I am actually second in line with inheritance, and my older brother got all the inheritance, and he's not sharing anything. And so Jesus is saying, I'm not going to be a judge on this, but it does make me think of a story. And so he says this story, and he's hoping that the man who had asked him to rule in his favor against his brother, he hopes that this man hears it. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And this man thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops, which is not true. He had a place, because what you'll read in the next sentence is that he actually had a place and tore it down in order to build a bigger place. So he says, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns, and I will build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. And I will say to myself, doing pretty good here. You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Kick back. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, or we could even say life said to him, you fool. You think you are clever. You think you can plan for every contingency as if you are in control. You think you can engineer out the chaos, the messiness and uncertainty of life. You think the ground, the crops, the yield, the surplus is all yours to do what you want? This very night, your life will be demanded of you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God, not rich toward life, not rich with love. And then the second reading is a haiku. My storehouse burned down. Now nothing stands between me and the moon above. I'm grateful for the presence of the Threshold Choir and the sharing of their gifts with us, and it is very appropriate that they are with us this morning as we continue to look at resilience. They bring peace and grace to people who are at the threshold of this life and the next life. They see the resilience of people who are dying, the resilience of the families who care for their dying loved ones, and they bring profound moments of grace to the dying and to the grieving process. So thank you for your calling and for your work among us. Last Sunday, I shared a definition of resilience from Andrew Zolli. Resilience is the capacity to maintain our core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. The fighter gets up after being knocked down. The tree bends but does not break in the storm. A dying parent still puts the welfare of their children first. A dying partner says to their soulmate, "When I'm gone, you must go on and love again." These are all examples of capacity to maintain core purpose as a human being, to go beyond ourselves, and to maintain an integrity of wholeness in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. In addition to sharing this definition last Sunday and expanding on it, I also offered that humility is an appropriate way to be in the world, admitting that we don't know it all, can't fix it all, nor prepare for it all. This acknowledgement in and of itself is a tool for resilience. Life is messy. Life is chaotic. We do our best to mitigate uncertainty. We strive to build in safeguards to keep the chaos out. And like the parable, we build storehouses and walls to keep the security to ourselves. We do our best to tame every force of nature and prepare for every contingency. We may even get arrogant about how much we can do, and we can do a lot. Yet messy and hurtful change finds us. Messy and hurtful change finds us. It finds our families. It finds our churches, our jobs, our nation, and our world. Sometimes life says, "You fool, this very night, your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" Thus, the parable of the rich man who built bigger barns to secure his retirement. He was not in control, and so he was rich. But he was rich in the wrong way. He received the bad news that his life was not his own, and it was required of him before he could finish his plans or enjoy the fruits of his labor. What do we do? How do we respond when the bad news comes to us? Raymond Carver wrote a poem about this experience. Let me share it with you. The poem is titled, "What the Doctor Said." He said, "It doesn't look good." He said, "It looks bad, in fact, real bad." He said, "I counted 32 of them on one lung before I quit counting them. I said, I'm glad. I wouldn't want to know about any more being there than that." He said, "Are you a religious man? Do you kneel down in forest groves and let yourself ask for help? When you come to a waterfall, mist blowing against your face and arms, Do you stop and ask for understanding at these moments? I said, not yet, but I intend to start today. He said, I'm real sorry. He said, I wish I had some other kind of news to give you. I said, amen. And he said something else I didn't catch, and not knowing what else to do, and not wanting to have him have to repeat it, and me to have to fully digest it. I just looked at him for a minute, and he looked back. It was then I jumped up and shook his hands with this man who had given me something no one else on earth had ever given me. I may have even thanked him, habit being so strong. Some of you have heard the terrible news. Sometimes you were on the receiving end, and sometimes you were the one who gave the news. The news can be about a terminal illness you have, or a terminal illness your loved one has. The news could be about the life-changing accident or death of a loved one. Maybe your child went for testing and you learned life-changing news. On the one hand, you were devastated. On the other hand, relieved that your suspicions were confirmed and your questions were finally answered. Perhaps you were on the receiving end of bad news about your job, and now you're eaten up with worry about providing for your family. I know some people who were the bearer of such bad news, and then after they did all the hard emotional work for their company and did all the confrontation, they found themselves on the other end of the hatchet. You can walk into your office or your school, and the person who was always at a certain place at a certain time and brought a unique presence is gone in the blink of an eye. I want to acknowledge this loss and grief. I want to also acknowledge the amazing resiliency of human beings to go deeper and to go higher. The last lines of the poem said, at the end, he says the doctor gave him something. The poem says, I jumped up and shook hands with this man who had just given me something no one else on earth had ever given me. I may have even thanked him, habit being so strong. The doctor gave him something no one else on earth had ever given him. What is that something? Sooner or later, many of us will find ourselves in a doctor's consulting room, hearing bad news about ourselves or loved one. The journal titled The Oncologist has an article that encourages oncology doctors to use a memory aid to help them break the bad news to their patients. In training, they learn SPIKES, a mnemonic, S-P-I-K-E-S. S stands for setup. Set up the situation so it has a good chance of going smoothly. P, perception. Find out the patient's perception of the medical situation. What have they been told about the disease? What do they know about the purpose of the unfavorable test results you are about to discuss? I, invitation. Find out how much information the patient wants to hear. K, knowledge. Use language that matches the patient's level of education. Be direct. Avoid using medical jargon as it might confuse the patient. E, empathize. Use empathic statements to respond to the patient's emotions. S, summarize and strategize. This memory aid gives a doctor a way to give the news to a patient. Spikes, S-P-I-K-E-S, is a helpful way for the doctor to share the bad news. It brings a kind of clinical precision to an emotionally messy process. It equips the bearer and receiver of life-changing news to be shared, and thus creates a platform by which grace and resilience can emerge. Now, this is a practical piece that you can hold on to, but what I really want you to experience is the wonder and the awe at our spiritual capacity to move from the devastation of life-changing circumstances to a place of wonder and gratitude. At the end, the poet again says the doctor gave him something no one else on earth had ever given him before. What is that something? The something is connected to forest groves and to waterfalls, mist on the face and the arms, and kneeling to ask for understanding and peace. Understanding and peace that surpasses our usual human peace and understanding. This something seems to be a sudden, keen awareness of the beauty all around, the love in our life, and the gift of every day. This something seems to be a sudden gratitude for all the things and for all the people we usually take for granted. This is grace. And so, the Japanese poet, in contrast to the parable of Jesus, not building a storehouse, but saying, my storehouse burned down. Now nothing stands between me and the moon above. This is grace. Amen.